So a monk sits in a small room in an Egyptian desert. 4th century. No phone, no radio, no window that's worth looking out of. Just him and, I guess, time. Around 12 o'clock, noon. Always this time. Something happens. The hours, they seem to stretch. The walls, they close. His mind starts pulling him towards the door, towards somewhere else. Anything other than the room and his mind that he's sitting with. The Greeks had a word for this. They called it acedia. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly. Translates the noonday demon. The feeling that you can't sit where you are right now. The monk, he stayed anyways. That was the instruction. To stay. Okay, I'll get back to the monk story. But what we're going to be talking about today is this new phone that's one of actually many that have recently been hitting the market. And it's called Medita Compact. And it retails for $3.99 American dollars. And it has an e-ink screen, the same screen that Kindles have. So that like kind of white, with like the black letters on it. And only those colors, nothing else. But this phone, it can make calls, you can text people, it has a calendar, it has offline maps, and also a basic camera. But there's no app store, there's no social media, and no browser designed for scrolling. And the battery, it lasts 6 days. It won actually 2 major design awards last year. And it's not marketed as like a protest to our modern day smartphones. It's marketed as a phone for people that want to be less distracted. Because searches for dumb phones have risen more than 300% in the past year. And feature phone sales in the UK rose 4% in 2024. People are paying $400 for a phone that does less. And that's what I want to bring attention to today. Okay, so the monks in the desert were not the first people to write about, or even actually, they definitely weren't the first people to feel this like pull away from like a sitting idle moment, like boredom. But what he did with this feeling, this pulling feeling, was kind of specific. Evagrius Ponticus, I might be butchering that name, but he was a 4th century monk who wrote extensively about acedia and was direct about what to do in this moment, and it was do not leave. And in his time, do not leave the cell. That was his prescription to this acedia feeling. The time of temptation is not the time to leave one's cell. Rather stand firmly and be patient. To flee and shun such conflicts schools the spirit in awkwardness, cowardice, and fear. And what he's effectively saying is that the feeling was not the problem that needed to be solved, but in feeling it and staying with it was practice. And every generation since has found is trying to find a way out of this feeling, this boredom. Fast forward many a century to our very recent ancestors, and maybe some of us today, no, can't be, maybe. Rapid industrialization and city life turned boredom into like a mass condition for the first time. Because the pub, the music hall, the churches, the cheap newspapers, the spectator sports, they all emerged as answers to that same feeling. Because in this era of time, we were not working the entire day in the field, and then we didn't have light, whatever, so we'd go to bed early and then we'd wake up and continue working. Industrialization changed a lot of things about how we work and how we spend our time. And then these things emerged. And then radio arrived in the 1920s, television in the 1950s, and each time the same anxiety, this thought of this new thing has arrived that is destroying our ability to just sit here with myself. But these solutions to this boredom, or this exit to this feeling that this monk was describing, they had limits because the pub, it closed. The television was in that room over there and you couldn't bring it with you on the train. Same thing, the radios at the time stayed in the house and you didn't really listen to them in public when the portable ones came along. And in those idle moments where you're standing in the queue or you're taking public transport, you still had the time to just kind of exist. And this is because you couldn't take this exit to this boredom feeling with you. So you were forced into just existing in it. And then the smartphone came along and it changed everything. Because the exit to that feeling, our solution to boredom, you could just put it in our pocket. And in every idle moment these days, we just pick it up. And the thing is, we all know, and we've spoken about this before a lot, it was engineered for that. The infinite scroll, variable reinforcement, algorithmic feeds, they're all specifically designed to keep you here. So the research is specific when you stay in the cell, when the brain has no external tasks to focus on. It shifts into what neuroscientists called default mode network. And it's a system of connected regions that in our brain that become active at rest, or when we let our mind wander, or we have some sort of like inward introspective moments. Neuroscientist Marcus Rachel at the University of Washington actually identified this in 2001, so 25 years ago. The default mode network, or DMN, is associated with memory consolidation. Imagining the future, understanding other people's perspectives, and forming a sense of self. It's not a passive state per se, because it's where some would argue the brain does a brain does a portion of its most important work. And that's when we kind of leave it alone to do that. And the issue we have in our day and age is a smartphone interrupts that. But the part that is a little bit less obvious, it makes interruption harder to stop. And what does that mean? Well, there was a peer-reviewed study, came out this year, 2026, and it found that people who strongly dislike boredom, people who struggle to just sit in our cell, like our monk, are people that actually use their phones more. Obvious, right? But they actually experience boredom more intensely than others. And you can also be like, it kind of makes sense because they're so used to it. When they get bored, it's like, oh my gosh, what do I do? But you would think that in that state, the phone would fix that feeling. So they would get bored, they would pick up their phone, and then they would feel less bored. The problem is, the research shows the opposite. They actually felt more bored. Well, it made the intolerance worse. And maybe that you can kind of relate to that. Maybe I think I can sometimes when I scroll and I get stuck on scroll and I'm bored and I'm scrolling and then I'm like, oh, I kind of hate this. I feel even more bored. And then you sit there for an hour and yes, you're still just as bored, but you just feel worse about yourself, kind of vibes. And a separate study found that after using a smartphone, people actually felt more bored and they were fatigued. Kind of exactly the feeling that I'm describing. It's not like the phone alleviated the boredom. Epicurus knew this in a different language. He wrote that in giving into acedia, i.e. leaving the cell and giving into that like state of not being bored, made the monk worse at sitting still next time. 16 centuries later, the peer-reviewed research on smartphones is describing the same loop. So I'm going to make an assumption here, and I might be wrong, but most of the people buying this e-ink smartphone here are not reading from the teachings of Epicurus or learning about default mode network in the brain, but there was something about their own lived experience and interaction with the smartphone in this day and age that told them kind of the same thing. The proverbial exit or the solution to the boredom was actually making things worse. So they paid $400 to remove this distraction completely. It brings up an interesting question, because what's happening in the generation now that are saying, hey, there's actually a market for worse technology with less features. The fact that that exists in this day and age and people are buying it, it says something about a generation who is struggling because we've never had practice in just staying here with ourselves. Because there is actually research that shows, or at least it suggests, that children who have grown up in this area here, who never got to just sit idle, so they're referencing a lot of like the iPad kids, they never got bored. They may not develop the internal capacity to generate their own meaning in stillness. And we don't have longitudinal evidence yet, so enough time hasn't passed such that we can actually see the greater effects of this. But if we go back to the story about our monks, they would have had a hypothesis about it. And it leads back to our story in the beginning. And I obviously don't have a child, and I know parenting is really difficult these days. There's so much that parents have to do. And life is just hectic. So throwing the iPad giving the kid an iPad or putting on a TV show is sometimes a relief for parents. But I remember when I was a child, maybe this makes me old, but we didn't have that technology. So it was a lot of like fairy tale playing, and you would kind of make things up in your head, and you would, we just had a lot more of a vivid imagination. And I don't know now if that's changing because of like smartphones and stuff, because I feel my imagination is probably stunted a little bit because I spend so much time being like brainwashed by this thing. And I say brainwashed I'm being dramatic, but a lot of what I think about is triggered from something like this rather than just me thinking. I don't know. So a lot of my friends, especially when I did my philosophy masters, they actually switched to a flip phone. So one of those like old Motorola flippy phones, and got rid of the smartphone completely. And I think all of us were like, oh, we wish we could do that. Oh, okay, let me speak for myself. I was like, I wish I could do that. But I think I'm slightly more addicted to my phone than I would like to admit. And it feels like it's my connection to the entire world, and I need it, and I won't be able to give it up. But damn it, I wish that I could. But I'm going to make a prediction, and let's see if it happens. In the next few years, we can already see like the onset of the smartphone industry being challenged a little bit by these AI companies, with OpenAI trying to make their own phone and all this kind of stuff. And I think the reason towards that is that the AI architecture doesn't work on our smartphones with apps in the way in which they would like it, like a full integration. And I think what I would like is I would like a thing that's not a phone, but something that I could talk to that does the things that I needed to do. Like my phone is my payment, my camera, my this, my that, my maps, everything that it is for you as well. But I think the whole interface of a smartphone is going to change. Like, if we can start talking to AI and being like, hey, please do this for me, whatever, I think our lives, okay, I'm going to speak for myself, I think my life would be a lot better than having to click on apps to do things. Maybe I've just become like, I value efficiency more than I expected to, that like clicking on apps is actually frustrating. But yeah, I don't know. I've got a feeling that the entire smartphone industry is going to be like, but we'll see. But I think I would like a device like that personally. Anyway, I'll check it tomorrow. Well, actually in 2 days.